to this. I worked there for about a year, and now I'm here at the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. I'm excited to help bridge the gap between the PUC and the public that we serve. So I'll go ahead and get into the meat and bones of this meeting today. Go ahead and change the slide. Thank you. So I'll first start off with who the PUC is, and we are a state agency under the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. That little blue logo you see on there, you might be more familiar with that logo. DCCA, it's comprised of a bunch of different departments, but we are a state agency under this department. It is led by 3 commissioners that are appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and supported by a staff of about 60 people, employees, lawyers, accountants, policy analysts, economists, engineers, admin, HR, etc., and myself. So there's just a quick little picture of us that we took quite recently, actually, I think in October. So just wanted to kind of share some, you guys might see some familiar faces, but you'll see the 3 commissioners at the bottom there. Go ahead and next slide. Perfect. So what industries does the PUC regulate? This is a question that we get a lot because we don't necessarily regulate everything and everyone, but we do regulate quite a bit of entities, and it's nearly 2,000. So this includes our energy providers, that's Hawaiian Electric, Maui Electric, Hawaiian Electric Light Company. We also have Kauai, and Hawaii Gas. Telecommunications include Hawaii Telecom and 205 wireless and wireline companies. Water and wastewater, we regulate private water and sewer companies, but we don't regulate county or municipal water and wastewater systems. Motor carriers, there's a little over 1,000. Passenger carriers and over 500 property carriers. We don't regulate taxi services or ride hauling services such as Uber and Lyft. And then we have the water carriers, Young Brothers and Honoheke. This is just something that I wanted to share, but we regulate all chartered, franchised, certified, and registered public utility companies operating in the state. We review and approve rates, tariffs, charges, and fees, determines the allowable rate of earnings in established rates, issues guidelines concerning the general management of franchised or certified utility businesses, and acts on requests for the acquisition, sale, disposition, or other exchange of utility properties, including mergers and consolidations. That sounds like a lot, and so we're kind of going to break that down and get into what is it that the PUC does and what does that mean for you guys. Go ahead and next slide, please. Perfect. So the PUC's role is to ensure that these services that are being provided by these utilities are safe, reliable, economical, and environmentally sound while balancing consumer interest, utility operations, and state policy objectives. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. Next slide, please. How does the PUC work? When people ask this, it gets kind of complicated. So I kind of want to break this down for you, but you'll hear the word quasi-judicial. And what that means is that we function kind of like a court. When we say quasi-judicial, it means that it kind of like a court, but not a traditional court system. So what that looks like in practice is the PUC hears and decides cases called dockets. These dockets, which I'll explain later, are related to public utilities like electric, water, and what we just discussed. In many of these cases, formal procedures are followed. Parties like utility companies, government agencies, or community groups like yourself submit written testimony, evidence, and legal arguments. Sometimes these hearings and the commissioners act like judges. They listen to both sides, weighing the facts, and then ultimately issuing a decision. Once the PUC makes that ruling, it now has the force of law, similar to how a judge's decision works in court. But unlike a regular court, the PUC only focuses on utility-related matters. It also has regulatory responsibilities like approving rates, overseeing service quality, and ensuring fair access, not just simply settling disputes like a court would. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I'm going to go over the process of what a traditional process looks like at the PUC. So what happens is the PUC, like I mentioned, reviews and makes decisions on utility rates, service charges, infrastructure projects, and more. And the process in most cases follows the following steps. So what happens is the utility submits a request. The utilities file an application either for a rate change, a new project, service changes, or even all of the above. The PUC reviews the request to determine if it aligns with the state laws, policies, and consumer interests. A docket is opened, and a docket is basically basically a record of a case. It's a way to keep track of all of the documents, comments, decisions, and updates related to a specific matter, such as a proposed rate increase. We just call these dockets. So it's where all of this is housed. A docket is opened. The PUC, like I mentioned, creates a public docket, which is an official record of the case. And I mentioned that the docket includes filings, reports, evidence, position statements, public comments, and again, that is available to the public to see all of this. The docket can also be opened, and this is important to know, not only if a utility submits a request, but also if the PUC decides to do so. They deem that something is important, they can also open a docket on that issue. Next is that public hearings and input are typically requested. In most cases, a public hearing is required where residents can provide oral or written testimony, and so can the parties that are involved. And then typically following the public hearings, after some time of review, there's a decision being held. So the PUC reviews the record, and when I say record, I'm talking about all of what has been submitted into the docket, and then before they make their decision. The decision, they can approve, they can modify, or they can deny the request, and the decisions are made in writing and filed in the docket for public review. Parties to these dockets can appeal these decisions. And then following that is the ongoing oversight. So the PUC monitors utilities to confirm they follow approved regulations and commitments, and complaints can be filed if a utility is not meeting these service requirements. So that's the typical process of how these dockets work in most cases. There are some cases where they don't follow this specific outline, but that it tends to be a little bit more complicated. But I think for what we want to know here is how it typically works. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now I'm going to go into how you, the public, can stay involved and or get involved, or sorry, stay informed and or get involved. Next slide, please. So there are several ways that the thank you. There are several ways that the public can get involved, so it can stay informed. And so some of these ways are through the PUC website. We have a website that, like I mentioned, hosts all of these dockets. We also have updates on any public meetings, notices, or hearings. We also have a YouTube page where we post the recorded meetings and hearings, our own dedicated YouTube channel. We have what's called CDMS, or Case Docket Management System, and that is where you can search for the existing filings, decisions that have been made in any active dockets in that are at the PUC. You can also subscribe for updates. I'll show you in the next few slides what our website looks like and how you can subscribe. So what I mean is that you can subscribe to a docket. So if there's a docket that you're interested in, which hopefully we do shortly after this, is the Energy Equity Docket, you can subscribe to that. It'll ask you for your email, and anytime something is filed in this docket, you'll get a notification of that filing. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. Perfect. So this is what our homepage looks like. On the top left-hand corner, that's what you'll see when you open up the page. They have these different consumer buttons, these search cases and filings. There's even a page dedicated to just engaging with the PUC, submitting comments, anything that a consumer might want to know. Then if you scroll down on that page, you'll see what's new / announcements, and that's where you're going to see any of the upcoming public hearings or public meetings that the PUC has going on. And then we also have a feature tab on the right-hand side that highlights any of the more parts that we want to highlight, such as the equity docket, and we even have some wildfire mitigation tabs on there as well. So this is kind of where you're going to see a lot of what the predominant information is. Can you go to the next slide for me, please? Perfect. And then once you when you hit the search button and you type in the docket number, or you can even type in keywords of that docket, it'll take you to what you'll see on the right-hand side, that bottom corner. And you'll see, for example, I just typed in the 2022-0250 case. And yep, thank you so much, Stacey. And if you see there on the right-hand side, it gives you the option to subscribe right then and there, or you can open the docket and see what information is inside. So I just wanted to highlight that it gives you that option right there to subscribe, or and then you'll see once you click view what that looks like as well. If you can just switch to the next slide. Thank you. So when you click view, it takes you to a page that looks like this. I clicked on documents specifically because I like to see what is inside of this specific case. And then you'll be able to see all of the public comments, any decisions and orders being made, any questions that any of the parties have imposed, and you can see that all there. You'll also see in the top right-hand corner, it says subscribe as well. If you can just hover over that just little part, Stacy, but it says subscribe, and that is where you can also subscribe to the docket. So it just gives you different ways in which you could do that. If you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I think next slide, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're frozen too, because it's still on the same page. Oh, there we go. So now we're going to talk about how to get involved. So a lot of people might not know, but your voice does matter to the PUC. We want to hear from everyone, from anyone, to help us make decisions that reflect all of Hawaii's concerns and perspectives. Because if it's just limited to us staff, then we're not getting, the whole view of what the community feels. So there are a few different ways in which you can participate. The number one way, or sorry, not number one, but one of the ways is to submit a public comment. There are multiple ways that the public can submit a comment. You can submit it through email. I provided the email there. It's just puc@hawaii.gov, and you just reference the docket number in the subject line. And then 2, you can mail your public comment. You can send in a written comment to the address provided, or there's a way to do that online. When you do it online, it's just it just takes you through a form of different steps that it asks you. I think it asks you for your name, your email, and for the docket that you are wanting to provide comment on, and then you're able to provide comment electronically. This is another great way, again, just 3 different ways in which you can provide public comment. You can also attend a public hearing, like I had shown you guys. The public hearings are posted on our website. They're typically also posted in the newspaper, and we're working on posting more on Facebook and Instagram as well to target a larger audience. But these are just different ways in which you can attend the public hearing. We also, like I mentioned, have the PUC YouTube page where you can watch the public hearing as well. another way to get involved is for formal participation. So while anyone can attend a public hearing or file a public comment, you can also file a motion to become a party to a docket. These parties play a more formal role in building the docket record and decision. There is some rules spelled out in which have to be abided by to be a party. But in plain English, what happens is, or what we want to know is why you want to be a part of this docket, and specifically how you think you can help us get good information into this docket. To become a formal participant, you do have to get approved by the PUC, so that's why those details are very important. But once you're admitted, there's not a whole lot of obligation in terms of what is required of you, but what you do get is opportunities. And these two basic opportunities that pretty much everyone in the proceeding gets is you get a chance to ask questions. They're called IRs, or information requests, of the utility that the utility must answer. And two, you get to file a statement of position in the record. A statement of position is something that the PUC, when writing, can use when writing an order. They rely on it and adopt arguments or evidence in it. Statement of positions, which essentially is what that is, essentially have quite a bit more power than public comment. So
Yeah.
if you're oh, sorry. I thought I heard something. I'm so sorry. Yep. So they have quite a bit more power than a traditional public comment. This is, again, just a little bit more of a detail of a more progressive way to get involved. So if you have any questions on that, you guys, I'll have my contact info at the end where you guys can reach out about how to become a formal participant. And I think what we want to know now is, why does all of this matter? Why should I get involved? If I get involved, what does that mean, and what does that even look like? If you can go to the next slide for me. Perfect. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Energy Equity and Justice Docket. The docket number is 2022-0250, and it'll be on a couple slides, but if anybody needs a link, I will send one as well. Next slide, please.
Do you mind if we pause for a sec for questions?
Yeah.
Just because that was a lot, and I feel like we're kind of shifting.
Yeah, no.
I have a few questions, and I know if anyone else has questions, you can type them in the chat or just speak up. I was wondering about the public hearing part. I'm more familiar with like the state legislature and the county council. Is it something that you have to attend in person if you want to give public comment live, or is there like a way to do that online also?
Yeah, so great question. You do not have to attend in person to provide public comment. And you don't even have to attend in person to attend this meeting. Oftentimes, they provide a virtual option or a hybrid option if it's possible. It all depends on where the location of the meeting is. But if it's possible, they allow for virtual participation, and you can provide public comment virtually. You can even do it how I mentioned, submitting a public comment via mail. You can submit a public comment via email or even online. So, so if you want to submit public comment for a public hearing that's happening, you don't necessarily have to do it then and there. You can do it the day after, or even before that meeting, and you could do it through any of those three ways that I mentioned before, which was email, mail, or online, as long as you refer the docket number that you want to provide public comment on.
I think Shay had a question. If anyone else has a brief question, just raise your hand, and then we'll get back onto the agenda in about 5-6 minutes.
Thanks, Stacy. Mine's related to Stacy's question, and it's deadline. So I noticed there's a lot of folks here who are very active locally for county council meetings or state legislature. And so we are all fully aware of like public notice requirements from the council or the state legislature in terms of, the council has to give, I can never remember, 6 or 7 days notice of a meeting. And then you have, you can show up in person and you want to get your testimony in either written prior or be there in person. The state legislature, usually you have a few days notice, but then you have to give your testimony within, 48 hours, right? Or 24 hours now. So I guess my question is deadlines, because is there a place that shows, this is when your comments need to be submitted, and then as a person, who takes out time to do those kinds of comments, you want to know that your comments are being heard. And so
Mhm.
I get really confused with the PUC of like, when is this just going into a void because I missed a deadline because I didn't understand? Yeah, so I just kind of like to understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question. To my knowledge, there is not a deadline in terms of when to submit the public comment, as long as it's submitted before the decision and order is made. So typically, trying to figure out how to best phrase this, but if you get a public comment in before the docket is closed, then it will be read and acknowledged. There's not a hard deadline in terms of like 10 days before the decision order, because a decision and order, there's not even a timeline for that. Like, I think there's a timeline that we like to follow and we like to go by. But the, once the commissions make their decision, and that is, I believe, provided, or announced before that would actually happen, to the party, your comment can be submitted at any time. So there's not like a hard deadline in terms of like 10 days before, 5 days before, or anything like that. As long as the docket is open, and you can see that on the website, it'll say open, you can submit your comment.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Then on the other side too, my other question is kind of about like sort of the notice of things. Like, for example, you know, we just recently became aware that there was, I mean, the docket about the wildfire mitigation. I saw that there's a hearing, a public hearing on the 24th, which is only 13 days away. And I don't know that people are fully aware that that plan even exists or how to get it. And we were in contact with Hawaiian Electric, asking them to provide hard copies in public forums. I don't know if they will or not, but it seems like, are there any rules or requirements in terms of making sure people, you know, especially like a 100, 200-page document, have time to actually review it? You know, and then I think about things like CWRM and other things where, you know, you have this thing before like an EIS, et cetera. So that part is also very confusing to me.
Yeah, there's no requirement in terms of how many days notice we have, or necessarily the PUC has to provide, or even the utility about the public hearing. But that is something that we're working on. We recently, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, we recently onboarded a consulting outreach consultant, where they're helping us develop a list of different community organizations that we should be touching base with, depending on, you know, whatever that subject might be. But we're working on, like I mentioned, we are now collaborating with DCCA to get posts on Facebook as well as Instagram. As of now, I believe our statute only recommends us to publicize in the local newspaper, which we do. However, I completely understand where you're coming from. It's not enough time. It's not getting in front of the right people. And we're aware of that. And we're slowly but surely trying to get in front of more people's eyes, meeting people where they are, rather than expecting them to meet us where we are, if that makes sense. But as far as a requirement, to my knowledge, there isn't one.
Okay, well, that's great. I also think I mean, I do a lot of different community engagement for different kinds of projects, and something that comes up a lot is, you know, younger people, of course, can get the information on Instagram, et cetera, but there are people who either are not that savvy and or do not have as much access. And it would be really great to have hard copies of things like the fire mitigation plan at public libraries, at grocery stores, and at all the different meetings and events. We have all these county budget meetings coming up, or they're happening right now. If there was at least one copy or a postcard that shows a QR code so people know how to get it. And Stacy and I would be happy to start distributing those kinds of things if you could provide them. And we don't have the budget to print up the 200-page documents, but we really feel like they should be getting out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I think that the recommendations that we get from the community is so important, and that's kind of what I'll talk about as well, is that understanding how is it that you guys want to be reached, is super important for us, because if it's more feasible for you guys to be for you guys to hear about meetings in a certain way, then that's something that we want to hear. Because as of now, again, like I mentioned, what we do is the newspaper, and then we have slowly started posting online via Facebook and Instagram. But and then we're working on a list of community members to which we can start to facilitate any notices to as well, so that they can share with their communities, because it's a lot of stuff is word of mouth, right? So completely understand what you're saying.
Thank you so much for the pause. We have one more question about this, and then we're gonna move on because I know we're getting close on time. But just wondering how you said that testimony is weighted if you are a party or an intervener. How is that weighted differently than public comment in the decision-making process?
That's a great question. And I is it okay, Stacey, I'm sorry, if I can get back
Think
to you
about
on
it,
that? I
and
don't,
then
yeah,
we'll come
I
around
don't
at
want
the
to be,
end.
yeah, okay, great. I don't want to
Yeah.
be wrong on this, so I just want to make sure I get, all of that correct. So,
Yeah. Think it through
yeah,
and we'll
because it's a little more
continue on and
technical. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so
okay.
much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll keep going. Thank you so much for
Thank you. Perfect. So, awesome. So we're going to discuss just briefly the energy equity docket, because I know Lauren is going to talk about this as well. But the energy equity and justice docket was opened in 2022, and it was opened to tackle previously unaddressed issues that demanded more attention. I provided the QR link that links to the Energy Equity Justice Docket webpage that we have, that includes the meetings, the slides, docket summaries, things like that. And when we opened this docket, following feedback from the opening conferences, the Commission identified 5 tracks to consider a suite of actions. And those 5 tracks, I'll just run through briefly, is procedural equity, energy affordability and direct payment assistance, equitable siting and hosting of energy infrastructure, equitable access to clean energy, and utility performance and tracking. The docket was open to better integrate equity and justice considerations across Commission's proceedings, and the Commission's work more broadly. So that's including its role in overseeing and regulating the functions of the public utilities. So you can see how this investigatory docket was opened to kind of look at all of these different pieces and how can we apply it to the more broad work of the Commission. Go ahead, next slide, please. So this is just a quick breakdown of how where we started and where we are now. I'll let you guys kind of read through that, but if you would like, but I think what we want to focus on now is where we're at now and what we're looking to do. So in 2025, I know we're only 4 months in, but we kind of hit the ground running with this, and we held one of our final disconnection meetings in February. And we were holding a series of disconnection meetings, first with the utility, letting us know what they do on their end for disconnections for the community, for the public. And then we also held one with community organizations that directly deal with individuals affected by disconnections. We heard their sides, what they thought, what improvements they would like to see, what policies they could possibly see being implemented, and things like that. Our third meeting focused on what different states are doing currently for their customers. Not necessarily the utility on their end, but more so from the Public Utilities Commission or the Attorney General. And so what policies are in place to help their customers, or to help their constituents. What we're looking to do now is open up a new disconnections docket. So in this docket, which will hopefully be opening in spring, we will be focusing on policies and ways in which that we can help the customers with disconnections, especially during this time. We'll also be issuing affordability policy reports. So we'll be looking more so at ways that utilities can be more affordable, and developing a report on that. And then also holding an affordability policy meeting to go over that report. Looking ahead, we'll be investigating other tracks like the ones I mentioned before, those 5 tracks, and then increasing public engagement. We recently hired or onboarded our outreach consultant, which is to help us increase our public engagement. So that's, like I mentioned, how how can we look at this more objectively and say, how can we get the community more involved? What do they want to hear and how do they want to hear it? Not just what can we do? So we really appreciate and encourage engagement during this time, because we want to hear from you guys. How is it that you want to be engaged with? Because that's ultimately how we want to proceed. Next slide, please. So what's happening now? The PUC, like I mentioned, intends to open a disconnection docket where there will be the ability to implement and create policy on disconnections. There will be a motion to participate, which will be due 20 days after it opens. I'll have my contact information at the end where you can reach out to me if you're interested in this opportunity. But like I mentioned, if you're admitted to participate, you get those opportunities to be a little bit more involved in this docket and the policies that are implemented. So this is super huge. This is incredible news. It might not seem like it on a smaller scale, but like from my eyes and just from seeing the Energy Equity Docket kind of from the early stages, we're starting to we're going to be opening up a docket where we'll have the ability to create policy, especially during this time where LIHEAP has been unfortunately discontinued to our knowledge, and the bill of the Hawaii state funded LIHEAP did not go through as well. So it's a lot of things at risk right now, and some action needs to be taken. And so that's hopefully that's our hopes with this docket, to start making some changes for the better of the community. Next slide, please. All right, awesome. So this is the closing. If you guys request any more information, I have our website, our email, our phone number, my contact info directly is my email. That's my best contact. But as the PUC moves forward, I want you guys to understand that we're committed to doing things differently. We want to be more transparent, more inclusive, and more connected to the communities that we serve. And that means bringing new voices to the table, especially those who have not always been involved. So we know that this work takes time. Building trust, building relationships, and building policy, better policy, doesn't happen overnight. But we're in it for the long haul, and we hope that you guys see our efforts from now and into the future. But in doing this, we do need your help, we need your feedback, and we need your voice. So again, I highly encourage you all to be more involved, whether that's in this group here or just more broadly, kind of interacting more with our PUC website, the public hearings and such. But mahalo nui loa for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna just pause my screen share for a second. And I hope that this part was informative, and we're gonna move on to Lauren from the Sierra Club. I was wondering if you can define what LIHEAP is, because I had just heard this acronym for the first time recently. I didn't know what it was. So, and is it not in place anymore officially, or is it phasing out?
This question is for me, or I'm sorry.
Either one of you.
Oh, okay. I'm sure that Lauren will touch base on it, but as she's prepping for the meeting, it was the Trump administration cut the staff for the LIHEAP. LIHEAP is low income housing energy assistance program, and that helps low-income families pay for their home energy bills. We get the lowest amount in the state because the way that they calculate this amount is based off of a heating need, and because Hawaii doesn't really have a heating need, we have the lowest amount. But regardless, this program helps a lot of families, a lot of low-income families, with providing energy to their homes. And so because of what the Trump administration has done, the program seems to have been I guess discontinued. So I'm sure Lauren will kind of touch base on this a little bit more, but there's some news articles on it, and it doesn't seem like it'll be coming back. But again, I'm not 100% sure. It's just kind of what's in the news and what we're seeing.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna leave my camera off because there's something going on with my Wi-Fi at the moment. But Lauren, really excited to have you join us today. Also from the Sierra Club, I've been getting your emails about disconnections and the equity docket, and so I am just gonna let you start your presentation and excited to hear what you have to share.
Thank you so much. Aloha, everyone. I'm going to do this rocket speed because you know we're short on time and probably have questions. So you can go to the next slide. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. Hopefully you're familiar with the Sierra Club, but we work on a variety of issues. But a little about me personally is I'm an Indigenous Chicana from East LA, but I went to UH Manoa and I married a local boy from Honoka, and the rest is history. I've been doing community organizing for a really long time. But since 2019, I've been with Sierra Club and got involved in energy justice during the pandemic with so many vulnerable, struggling families as we are seeing today. So really want to position myself not as like an energy expert, but I'm very much an advocate and really passionate about the opportunity to change things. And as Val shared, we really have an awesome opportunity to do that and get more engaged. So my next slide, to kind of set some context of how we view energy and really recognizing if you're not familiar with the public trust doctrine, but in plain language, we use this a lot in water, but in plain language, it says energy sources are a part of the public trust. And that is a really huge tool that we use to protect our resources. And so I just really want people to like recognize that our energy sources are meant to be stewarded for everyone. No one should be disproportionately impacted or harmed by our energy sources. And that's really where we come with this understanding. So with that, it's also about participation, because the public trust also requires that beneficiaries, all of us, have a meaningful say in how our resources are tended. So just wanted to like set that as like a grounding and how we view it. And so next slide, please. And so as I'm going to more focus on utility disconnections. It's still on the public trust slide, but maybe you're frozen, Stacy. So for sake of time, oh yeah, there it is. So the PUC looks at energy burden a particular way. And so we look at it as like a financial burden, but also the disproportionate impact of energy facilities. And why I bring this up is because it's often, that the same like rural working class communities are dealing actually with both, right? Who are on the front lines of these big projects are also dealing with their financial burden. So it's like makes it that much more important that something, is done to deal with this disproportionate impact. So I put more language on there because I hope these slides will be shared with you guys. So the next one, oh yeah, you can move on, sorry. So as was shared, Valerie, this is a huge issue. That's why the PUC is taking it on and has a docket they're going to open, because there are a lot of struggling families. With the other PUC meetings that were held, a big thing that was shared, you have like Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, and the counties tried to do assistance programs, but like they all shared the same thing. Like they're underfunded and there's an extreme need for help. And oftentimes, it's not just the electricity bill that people are struggling with, right? There's compounding issues. So really addressing like this one thing can make a difference. And so the statistic here comes from the report, but also there's news articles again about twice as many homes had their power cut in 2023 than 2019. And with LIHEAP, as was shared, is effectively dismantled. And we have a Hawaii heap, a high heap, which is similar, which is at the ledge right now, but that's also kind of up in the air. So more needs to be done. So just want to set that tone. And then also with to push, not everybody experiences the same. We have a utility that is still able to, give multi-million-dollar pay, salaries, and raises to their executives. And so it's really important to kind of look at how we share the burdens and benefits of our energy system. So again, just setting context. And so we can move on to the next one. And this is more just of a transition, because we do have this docket where the focus is equity and justice. And so it's created this huge opening that's been out for a while. And so I don't need to go through it, but just showing you. I'll focus on the report that the PUC looked at. So that's on the next slide, please. And so the disconnection reform memo, they call it, was made by RMI, which is like a national lab, and they basically are highlighting and looking at the landscape of energy affordability challenges in Hawaii, and policy reforms to ensure basic energy access for all. And it found, that financial struggles, again, compounded in Hawaii by, we have high cost of living, climate-driven extreme weather, that many kupuna families, medically vulnerable individuals are at a greater risk. So some of the recommendations they have are to, address that, because they found approximately 80,000 households across the state are experiencing this energy burden, which can be multifamily homes, renters, you name it. So a couple of things they committed to, the PUC committed to, was this pilot program. And now we have this docket, which hopefully these actions will be taken. And then if you're not familiar with performance incentive mechanisms, or these PIMs, or the performance-based rate framework, the PUC has been trying for couple of years now, I believe, to kind of separate how the utility makes profits and make it more performance-based than their like traditional structure of like building out facilities, capital financing. It's a complicated structure that they have as an investor-owned utility, but at the end of the day, we want them to service the public the best, right? So with that comes report cards and metrics that they have to meet. And why I share that is because you can make comments on those things, as Valerie shared, on any docket that is open. You can provide public comment. So just sharing that. You can move to the next slide. Here's, and this one is just 2 highlights. Oh, I think we lost it, but I'll keep going for the sake of time. That, as I shared, households across the state are dealing with financial burdens, but MECO on Maui, they found that household disconnections more than tripled in 2023 from before the pandemic. So just again, highlighting the extreme need for action to take place for families. We can move on. That was just like the main thing, because there's actually a lot in this report. It's pretty dense and thorough. And because I like visuals, this one here kind of shows how they broke up some of their policy recommendation and reform options. And so in the broad kind of that you see on your right, disconnection reform, it aims to like stop utility shutoffs for non-payment altogether, temporarily or permanently. That's why during the pandemic we had the moratorium, and it was extended, and that provided a huge relief for a lot of families. But those, of course, are harder to put in place, but they have lasting protection. The narrow ones are what I would think are like more targeted or the most feasible. And the report shares, other jurisdictions have adopted these things. And so they have design considerations, they call it, specifically for Hawaii that the PUC can consider. And I highlighted just a couple, and we'll kind of go through a little bit more of them, because again, it's dense and it has a lot, but I'm just trying to condense for y'all for what's most maybe relevant for Hawaii. So the next one, I'll get into weather-based protections. And this could be really helpful, right? Because we're dealing with, a climate crisis that we have unpredictable weather, but it's been making hotter days, more humid days. And these weather-based protections can actually account for temperature and humidity. And of course, this is important, right? Because for medically vulnerable households or people who have medical devices at home and don't have access to these things, if their disconnections happen, right, these could potentially be life-saving. And the report also mentions that you can save a lot of healthcare costs because of that as well. I think they say something like $1 billion per year in excess healthcare can be addressed with these protections. So that's similar to the next one, which is vulnerable groups. And this is important because we do have, as you see, Hawaii, we have some protections in place. And you can read it through, or for the sake of time, basically HECO does have to notify the PUC prior to a shutoff of somebody who is like medically vulnerable or elderly, and the PUC has to approve that. And right now, Hawaiian Electric has, which is MECO as well, is they have like a medically vulnerable program, but it's full and there's a wait list. That is something that they shared in their meeting with the PUC. Sorry. And so basically, again, extreme need. If there's people who aren't able to get on that, who need it, there needs to be some type of standard created, some policies that so that all people who need it get it. So these typically have, you have to show like a medical, a doctor's note essentially to prove why you need this program, but then you discounted rates or a different approach to not getting shut off. And we can go to the next one. And so these are some of the broader, I mean, not the broader, more narrow solutions that are more have to deal with the amount that people pay. And it has a lot, but what I wanted to share is, I did forget to mention last slide, but they did have examples in other, again, jurisdictions, like New Hampshire doesn't disconnect, or people are delayed for up to a year if from losing their service if they're on a medical thing. Because again, this can be critical and life-saving. So here I have some of the other, low income discounted rates that can be tiered out for people at different levels. There's caps that can be based off of your income and how much you pay. Fee limitations and arrearage management, which is just basically, again, the structured debt payment plans that you can be on. Again, the utilities, both, KIUC too, but the utilities have some of this, but there can be like a better standards. And like I said, some state ban fees altogether to just help with people to be able to get back on their feet that way. And I think and lifeline electricity is something you limit a customer's power to a certain level rather than disconnecting service. This is something that KIUC does that HECO does not. Basically, this lifeline is just enough to like run your refrigerator, basics, so that people have something, but it's not the best condition. So obviously it would incentivize them to deal with their payments, but would not have them, have other kinds of ways of providing their own electricity. In one of the PUC meetings, people mentioned like they use camping lights, like because they don't have electricity, they're not able to afford their bill. So they have to use like camping lights around their house, and there's like wires everywhere. So sharing their story, it's kind of like people do what they got to do, but it shouldn't have to be that way. So more on that, but the way that, yes, thank you. So the way that you talk about how we're able to engage, Valerie went over that. But that one is, all I would say is just thinking about the way the PUC is described in the past is like for when you participate or you intervene is really thinking about how your rights are involved, or like how directly impacted you are, like she said, how your specific story or information can help them make a better decision. And so with as a participant, they've said you have like a strong interest in a single issue. So part of the docket and the decision might affect you, so you would participate. But if you are someone who feels like all aspects of this project are going to impact my health, my where I live, it could be socioeconomic, whatever it may be, that's when you intervene, because you have more like opportunities to, again, get information and share information that will be taken, I believe, in a higher consideration. But that's just the advocate end. Then like say public comment, which will be read, a low commitment, which I think is a great entryway for people, especially if you're used to the ledge and county. So I'll go over in the next slide just what it looks like, right? Because we're used to seeing these to some regard, unlike, capital.gov. And it's basically you enter your information, you reference the docket number. So it's pretty straightforward. And I highly encourage folks to, try and do this. We, a Sierra Club, as Stacy mentioned, we have these action alerts. Oh my God, I just noticed the time. I'm so sorry. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. The next one is just showing you the filing a motion to intervene or participate. Something I should have said is when you intervene, you can be an individual, an association, right, or a business or whatever, and you can have representation. I'm not sure if that, like Sierra Club participates in the equity docket, and Earth Justice actually technically like represents us. So you can have that, you cannot have that, up to you. And lastly, you know, just to leave you with my closing note is we've been here before, right? During the pandemic, people were getting shut off and nothing was being done, and the public put pressure on Hawaiian Electric. People submitted comments to the PUC as well as to directly to HECO and said, hey, people need help. So this was like our campaign, and people participated, and this Kakua fund was funded by shareholders and not customers. And a lot of the times we see when funds are created, it's often like on ratepayers or even taxpayers to do that. So it's possible, it just needs people involved. So the last slide is my mahalo nui as well. And if you haven't signed up to our newsletter, please do, because that's where we make it like super simple to know what's happening, why it matters, and how to get involved, and have all these templates for you and like testimony, because that's what we know people are busy, and but it's important. So that's it. I'm sorry, there's 6 minutes left, but I hope I didn't do a disservice to everything. But thank you.
No, that was a ton of information to pack into a very short period of time. And I just want to mahalo both of you so much. You're great speakers and you got a lot in there. And if anyone has questions, now's your chance. Otherwise, me and Shay are probably just gonna ask questions for the time that we have left. Okay, we have a question. Go ahead. I'm gonna put your hand down and go ahead and unmute.
Is that me, Stacy Kamana? Yeah. Hey, aloha. Mahalo, Lauren, and was it Valerie, the earlier presenters, and everybody. I'm newer, trying to understand and engage a bit with the PUC, and I know there's a lot of well-experienced people here. Just a general question, because we've been having some energy conversations and debates. To what extent can the PUC influence the operations of like HECO? For instance, after Hurricane Iniki, these hurricanes that have affected our islands, power companies could have chose to try to invest to bury lines. And I've been hearing different arguments around these issues where, oh no, the PUC won't allow them to make these kinds of infrastructure investments, or so I'm just trying to what extent can the PUC is involved in these kinds of operational decisions around, long-term infrastructure decisions for the utilities?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take that one. The PUC has the power to implement policy and procedures for the Hawaiian Electric Company, but all of that has to be done in a procedural matter. Like I mentioned, hearing from the public, if they felt that they got a lot of feedback from the public and wanting to investigate the possibility of undergrounding the lines, they could do that. But that comes with a lot of research, a lot of back and forth with the utility of what that could possibly look like. What does that look like on the cost for the consumers, on the cost for the company, and things like that. But ultimately, the PUC does have the ability to create policy for the utilities.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, the way I heard that question was kind of like, can the PUC require HECO to underground lines or like invest in infrastructure in specific ways that the community asks for? Would there be a way for like a community group to be a party and bring a docket that would then require HECO to engage in that conversation with the PUC as like the regulator?
Yeah, and I know there's other PC folks on there, so if anybody wants to jump in and correct me, please don't hesitate. But to my understanding, yes, like yes and no. So they have the ability to say, Hiko, you need to underground your lines. But again, all of that comes with, they have to weigh out the different costs of that. So it's not just telling Hiko, hey, you need to do this. There's costs that are related, staff that has to be added to the company, costs that need to be paid, and who does that all get put on, whether it's the company, the consumers, who pays for that and how. And so all of these different considerations have to be taken into consideration when directing a company to do something like that. Does that kind of answer?
Can I
Yeah,
add a thought to that?
Yeah.
yes, please.
If you were to underground all the lines on Maui, everybody's bills would double and everybody would have to underground lines that would connect at their own expense to the utility grid.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from people who haven't had a chance yet? Because I know we have like 30 people on here, so I just want to make sure I'm not taking up all the time. And kind of on that note, we did a tour with Hiko recently, and they were talking about how the power lines are shared with the telecom companies, and so that's a PUC regulated thing. Is that right? I'm trying to like work through my understanding of how that works because um an issue I hear a lot is like with the double poles, and I only recently learned that it's like, oh, because one of them is Hiko's pole and one of them is the telecom lines pole and they don't share
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, I can't say much on that because I'm not involved in that procedure, but I do, from what I do understand, is like it's Hiko's pole and it's Hiko's responsibility. So, and I could be wrong, but Hiko had bought out the lines from the pole. Sorry, had bought out the pole from Hawaiian Electric. So, if anything, say there's something going on with the line in front of your house, and you see that it's Hawaiian Electric, or even if you don't know, you would reach out to Hawaiian Electric because they own the poles. They would have to be the ones that come out and service anything that has to do with the poles because they own them. But as in terms of it being regulated, Hawaiian Electric is regulated, right? So their utility pole, I guess, might come with that, but we can't necessarily tell them, and I could be wrong, but we can't necessarily tell them what to do with that pole. But I know that there's that. I know that Hawaiian Electric owns the utility pole, and then they kind of bought out those rights from the Hawaii Telecom.
And so I guess the question is that regulated by the PUC or is that something that's just Hiko? I'm always struggling to figure out who is in charge of what.
Yeah,
And
I want to say that would be just Hiko, but I can double check and just get back to you if that's okay, Stacy.
you.
Thank you.
Valerie, is it okay if I jump in?
Oh, yes, please, Max. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max. I work with Valerie here at the PUC. So, Stacey, to your question about whether or not we also regulate double poles, we do, as a matter of fact. So the Hawaiian Electric has had a double poles docket that we've had ongoing. As Valerie mentioned, a few years back, they had an exchange between Hawaiian Telecom and Hawaiian Electric of who owns the poles. And the problem is that sometimes when they go to transfer these equipment, those lines, you look at a pole, they have telecom lines on the bottom. Those are like the thick, low-hanging ones. Then you have the higher up electrical lines. They'll go and they'll replace a pole, and then they don't know whose lines those are. And we've had to work with them and say, okay, they're not going to move another company's lines, or they don't have the expertise to move those lines, or they don't have the communication ability, they say, to get in contact with the other parties. So we've had to work with them to try and improve this process and get them to remove these things faster, more systematically, color code whose lines are where, know how much it's going to cost, renegotiate their labor so that they can do so more effectively. And so we've had them put up this website as well and try to improve this because basically they're leaving behind this old infrastructure that shouldn't be there. And that's not safe, that's not in the public interest, and it's irresponsible. So we've been trying to improve that.
Yeah, I basically got involved in energy advocacy because I had a triple pole in front of
Yeah.
my house. So it's still there, by the way. And I want to
Well-
kind of pivot this back to the equity docket if we can, if you guys have a few more minutes. Because I have been seeing all of this communication online about the equity docket in relation to the CEOs like multi-million-dollar raises. And I just wonder how, like, can you connect those dots for me? Because I like understand it, but I can't quite put it into words why those are connected.
I feel like that's probably for me. Or unless Valerie, you
Go, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, I
Lauren
was
or
gonna volunteer
Valerie.
Max or Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, historically, we've always tracked Hawaiian Electric Industries and HECO, like these bonuses, right? It happened during the pandemic, right? Just to kind of show not everybody suffers the same. And what ideally, right, having a utility that operates fully within the public interest and wouldn't like do these types of use of funds or misprioritization of funds. The equity docket is kind of, I view like this open gamut of what's wrong with our energy system, because if you read the description of it, it's investigating energy equity and justice considerations, and that's an economic justice consideration in our regards. So that's why we draw these connections, and we always have, and hence why we've kind of pressured the utility to use their funds from their own, even though they're in this like financial situation, right? They were on the brink of bankruptcy. So for us, how are they able to give these multi-million-dollar raises? It just doesn't feel equitable. So that's why we do it. And at the docket, it's open gamut. That makes sense.
From a
Oh.
technical standpoint, the docket is, I think, yes, in general, it is related in terms of the subject of like what's okay in society with respect to what's just and reasonable and fair about how those utility funds are used and who benefits from them. Literally, though, those bonuses were provided by Hawaii HEI, which is the parent company of Hawaiian Electric, and we don't regulate them. We regulate the utility in the same way that we regulate Hamakua Energy Partners, which is owned by Pacific Current, which is was owned by HEI, right? Well, I'm sorry, they sold off Hamakua, but right. So we regulate those below entities, not the parent company. So if the shareholders of the parent company choose at the board level to use the funds from selling off American Savings Bank, we don't have the power to regulate that. That is for the shareholders to decide. That's and my personal opinion is I also found it gross and not okay. But that's officially.
I know Shay has a question, but on that topic, I was just curious if there is a way for the PUC to get involved in that like relationship between HECO and HEI, that the profits from HECO aren't like it's a weird money moving thing that's also very complicated and convoluted to understand. And I just wonder how, like, I know the PUC can't engage with HEI, can't regulate HEI, but there seems to be a weird connection there between the two that's unregulated by anyone.
Well, no, they're regulated by the SEC. They're a publicly traded company. They didn't do anything illegal. They take the profits and use them for shareholder interest, and the shareholders decided that the executive management deserve these bonuses. I don't agree. I'm not, but that's what they did, and that's not what we regulate, and that's not in the docket, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. I know Shay's been dying to ask a question too, so I'll let her.
I know now I'm up to 3, but I was about to make a comment about the American Savings, and just so folks understand, and I'm not an expert in this area, but it is very unusual for a utility to also have a bank, and I don't think it's even legal anymore. And I know it's HEI versus HECO, so HEI is the holding company, it's not the utility. And it's not often mentioned, but it was in the most recent legislation that got, well, anyway, there's a whole thing. But and my husband, just to be clear, he's the one who testified about this. But You know, HEI made a sweetheart deal with its executives when it sold American Savings, and therefore made less money for the wildfire survivors. So I guess my question is, obviously you cannot regulate HEI, but I would hope that you could take it into consideration in some way when HEI says it has less money, since part of the issue is who pays for things, right? So I just want to make that comment. And then I had a completely different question that's just really strategic, because those of us who advocate, whether at the state legislature or at the county, you know, like when I submit testimony for the state, often I'll just copy and paste things because I know the legislators aren't even reading it anyway. But if they see 150 testimonies in support of something, that's what they're paying attention to. When I do the council, I do a slightly different thing because I know, oh, they always hear from me. So unless I have something very different to say from everybody else, I may not even submit testimony, or I might call my council member separately or something like that. So I guess my question is, in terms of commenting on the docket, what should the strategy be? Especially if we're, you know, organizing people, if we all copy and paste what Sierra Club has sent us, is the PUC going to even pay any attention to that? Or do I need to take the extra time to talk about what I know that's different and separate because I know someone's going to read it? Or are they? So that's my very direct strategic question.
Did you want to take it, Max?
Oh, no, but you're in the comm side, please.
Yeah, I was just going to, and you can add to this if you'd like, I was just going to say that the commissioners do read the comments. They go through the comments and they read them. From the comm side, I take note of every comment or the comments that come in, specifically more so for the Energy Equity Docket and the such as the YB hearing. But we do take note of it. It is because it is a public record or a record of the case. They do take that into consideration.
The HEI issue, if I can bring it up for a moment, let's say you get paid $50,000 from your employer and you decide to spend some on your family, to invest some, and to pay back a bank loan with some. And some Joe comes along and says, I don't like what you've spent your money on. You got to give some back to your employer so they can lower rates to customers. That would be equivalent to informing HEI that they should have given more money to shareholders, or they should have given more money to staff, or they should have invested more, but they gave too much for their CEO. That kind of thing is the profit that went up to them, just as people make income, and you're free to spend your income however you like.
I would argue that shareholder utilities finances are very different than individual finances, but
HEI is not a utility. HEI holds the profits that they've earned from owning Hawaiian Electric. And if they don't give it to the CEO, they would give it to their shareholders. You would not see it because it's profit, just like you earn income. Somebody else can't tell you how to spend your income.
Can I ask, so this is getting back to this kind of question of infrastructure investment for me. And I'm super new. Henry, I watched you on the news and learned so much from all your advocacy. So deeply respect your mana'o. But I'm just wondering, like in an instance like this, you know, that seems strange to me. On the Water Commission, we dealt with water diverters that relied on old infrastructure to move water that were built 100 years ago. And oftentimes these diverters would say, you know, it's just not financially feasible to upgrade these systems. And at the same time as there would be people at the top and the CEO levels making substantial profits off of them. So we had to find a way to require infrastructure investment to upgrade the systems to be, you know, resilient for our future of our islands. They were leaky, wasting. And so I'm just wondering, like, how, at some level, it seems like a similar issue to me. How, if the PUC can't require infrastructure investments, and burying the lines is just one example. Obviously, if that had been done, the Lahaina fires wouldn't have played out the way that they were. But I'm just wondering, you know, if it seems like a strange catch-22 to me. It's going to cost too much for the consumers, and yet there are these excessive profits above, and there's a regulator. So I'm be totally confused, but it seems similar to me to issues around water.
Well, and I just like to add, there isn't just the regulator, of course, there's the Hawaii State Legislature. And so HECO keeps going back to the legislature and the governor to get bailed out. So even if we don't have control of where the profits go, we do have control of whether our taxpayer funds and other funding goes to bail them out if they don't want to spend their own money and they want to give it to shareholders. And of course, we've seen that in California where there's different instances where we have HECO asking the ratepayers to pay for something rather than the shareholders, but in California, it was the shareholders that paid. So I think it's a little bit more complicated as far as, regulating the holding company. And maybe we can't regulate them, but we don't have to bail them out with our money.
I'm just going to kind of restate some of what Dr. Kamana said because I know it's kind of hard to hear him, but what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's hard for the public to kind of comprehend a utility saying they don't have enough money to fund their own operations while also simultaneously giving big raises to CEOs. And I understand there's technically and legally a difference between HECO and HEI, but for the public to kind of understand that, it's hard to see how the PUC can regulate it and enforce some of these, I think, needs of the community for the utility to invest in infrastructure. And that's not really, it's kind of this is all kind of more of a conversation, but I don't know if anyone from the PUC can sort of respond to that idea. And I know we're over time. I think Lauren's going to have to jump off, but if anyone has to leave, feel free to go. But I'm enjoying the conversation, so if you have time to stick around, I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Stas. I'm not entirely sure what it is that maybe you want us to respond to. Maybe you could restate it again.
Okay, so Henry's leaving some comments that's sort of making it easier to phrase my question. When there are open dockets about upgrading the grid or infrastructure related things, part of that conversation obviously has to do with cost. And so wondering how it's managed when you have a party like a utility saying they don't have funds when it's very apparent that the funds are available but just moved to an entity that's not regulated by the PUC.
You're talking on one hand about a few million, and on the other hand, a few billion.
Well, I don't necessarily think that's true, Henry, because when we were on our tour with HECO a couple weeks ago, there were all these like small things we were asking for. We weren't asking that all the lines be undergrounded. We were asking for different kinds of support for community engagement, and pretty much, and even like improving the way the bills are. I mean, the most simple thing that I asked for was that, when I get my time of use bill and I realize I'm one of the few people on time of use, but that when I get it, that they just define on grid, off grid, or not on peak, off peak, and mid peak. And they were just like, we can't do that just for 10 people, which is kind of ridiculous because it's not 10 people. But so it was like every little thing, it was like, we don't have the money for it. And I guess it's frustrating when, as a community, we see a lot of different little things that could be done better. And even just asking, again, I just asked for some hard copies of the fire mitigation plan. And they were just like, thanks for your feedback. It's just like, so I think there's ways that, those few million could be used to improve all kinds of things. And yes, the community gets to the point where they're just saying underground all the lines because they're so incredibly frustrated and are not getting any real information or being heard.
The PUC was founded in 1913. And in 1914, they issued their first annual report in which they concluded the public simply does not understand us. That has existed for the next 100 years. The PUC opens dockets. Anybody can intervene in the first 20 days. Most people never intervene. Most people never participate. And time of use rates were established in dockets in which anybody could have intervened.
Yeah, what I'll also add to that is I think, the way that it works, Hawaiian Electric, they come to us and they say, we want to spend this money, or we want to borrow this money. And then we go through this docket process that Valerie and Henry described. And we say, look, is this just and reasonable? We weigh, did they look at alternative analysis? What's the bill impact going to be? Is this legal? What do the interveners who come in say? What are the questions that they ask? How does this affect emissions? And then we issue an order. We don't own the utility, right? We can't just go in and say, hey, fix this. I mean, to some extent, there's leeway there. But the way that it generally works, this is more like a court than it is, and we're bound by our legal obligations and the let's say the domain of our authority. And like Henry said, these processes, they're public processes. Then I think it's also our kuleana, something we're working on to get people more involved and expand how people are going to get involved and provide the education that people need to be involved, because we realize that you're talking about legal issues, engineering issues, financial issues, right? All of which are quite technical, and they all interact then in a way that makes it even more complex. And so to be involved is really a lot of work. And that's part of why we're trying to, through the equity docket and through things like this, educate people, get them involved, and hopefully make incremental improvements to that over time. Because we realize that this is a difficult thing for people to understand. But yeah, the HEI and what HECO is spending, these are different things, and we don't necessarily have domain over all of them.
Well, and we realize it's incredibly complicated, and we really so appreciate that so many people from the PUC are here on this call, actually. Am I hearing something in the background, Stacy?
Someone's someone's unmuted, I think, but
There's
I
some
just really
static
want
background.
to
Well,
thank everybody for this lively discussion at the end too. I think that's a really good note to leave it on. I'm going to leave the Zoom room open in case people want to keep talking for the next 10 minutes. But I do think we need to let the PUC and people who are on their working hour go. But I really just want to thank you all, and I think want to reiterate the goal of this meeting is more to start allowing people to get educated about how all of this works, because it is very confusing. And I think the more that we're able to discuss this and allow people to ask dumb questions and engage with this in different ways than maybe it's always been done, the more access it's going to have for people who are hearing about the PUC for the first time. I didn't know
And-
y'all existed a year ago, and this has been super informative for me, and I hope everybody else that is listening. So I just
Can I
want
add
to
one last thing, Stacy?
Of course, Shay, of course. I just want to like be able to.
No, I know. I really appreciate
Everybody that needs to leave is allowed to leave, of course.
Well, and I just want to say is, most people do not know that the PUC even exists. They do not even know what the three letters mean. I've talked to people who are extremely knowledgeable and reporters, et cetera, who did not know the PUC only had 3 commissioners. So, my husband was as an expert witness for the Consumer Advocate a few years ago on the Nextera thing. So I got things from osmosis, but if I wasn't married to him, I wouldn't know myself, right? So I think that's super important that people, there is a huge education campaign that needs to happen, and people need to understand why the PUC matters. And just to clarify, one of the things that a kind of guiding principle for Stacy and I has been in our project is that people keep saying to us about all kinds of things, whether it's undergrounding the lines, whether it's microgrids, whether it's, clearing out the wattle on abandoned properties and putting solar panels there, people are always saying, why can't we blank? And generally speaking, the powers that be say, you can't because it's too expensive, because these are the rules, because blah, 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 blah. And we want to be able to answer them and say, you can. However, we would need to change this legislation, or you would need to participate in the PUC here, or, you know, or it would cost this much and it would only provide this much energy. So we have these trade-offs, but people need real answers because we need to make real decisions because we have a power plant going offline and another one that doesn't have parts. And we, you know, at least for right now, we still have these goals about 2035. So people need to know how, and of course, besides the disconnections, we have the PSPS that really affects vulnerable populations, and people have solutions. They have personal solutions about, you know, connecting new solar panels to batteries, et cetera. But they don't know if they're allowed to do it or they don't have support for doing it. And we need to figure out how they can actually have their ideas looked at and how they actually solve the problems. And it needs to be more transparent for people. And I realize part of it is it's just very, very complicated. But the community is pretty Akamai, and I think if we have the information, we can start really participating and be more helpful and useful and work together.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Shay, and keep having events like this, keep asking us questions, and we'll keep reaching out as well and try and make this a little bit better.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna do like my plugs right now. So the Maui Community Energy Alliance meets monthly at this time, at this day and time, every second Friday of the month to kind of facilitate these conversations. We also are working on forming a co-op and discussing things like ownership, which was kind of alluded to a lot today. So please reach out to me, engage with us. Genesis put the link to the website of information that we've been gathering, both on the technical side and just sort of community feedback. So if you want to get engaged more with this conversation, we do meet monthly and I am totally available via email, Instagram. I am kind of like my DMs are open. So if people want to talk about energy, I'm always wanting to discuss it and hear what people's thoughts are. And we also have the energy conference coming up on Maui next month, May 21st and 22nd. They do have what they call community rates for people to attend at a lower cost. And we, through the Upcountry Energy Resilience Project, are also trying to reduce that cost more for Upcountry Maui residents to be able to attend. So if you are wanting to go to this conference and kind of see who the power players are, pun intended, reach out to me. We are trying to make that more accessible for working people, families, that the, you know, $120, $600 price tag might be out of reach, to be able to attend and engage with the people making decisions about our energy future. I think those are all the plugs I have of things to make sure people know are happening. And did I miss anything, Shay?
Just that we're also going to do another PUC webinar, hopefully more about the fire mitigation plan, I think. That's a goal.
Yes, we are hoping to have a second, like a part 2 to this, to talk about other dockets that are up at the PUC right now, like the wildfire mitigation strategy, that Life of the Land is currently an intervener on. Henry Curtis, who's like an unofficial guest speaker, and a question answerer. So review that document if you have questions about it and want to engage as a party, as we learned today. Life of the Land and Henry Curtis would be who you reach out to about that for the wildfire mitigation strategy. I also think MEMA is having a fair this weekend at the mall about emergency management, and Hiko is going to be there as well. Anything I missed? It's been kind of a very dense hour and a half. So yeah, if anyone thinks of questions after the fact, because I know I always think of the perfect question after the meeting ends, feel free to email me and I will send out the slides from the PowerPoint and this recording next week.
And all the recordings of all the meetings are at Stacy's YouTube channel. So if you want to see past meetings or just let people know about the meetings, please feel free.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us again. We really appreciate it.
Mahalo. I'm gonna stop the recording now and we can just kind of
Gonna drop off. Thanks, everyone.
bye.